Today with Mark Sutcliffe is your place to talk on 1310 News and simulcast on Rogers TV.
We're joined every Wednesday on Ottawa Today by Carleton University political science professor Elliot Tepper. Good morning, Elliot.
Good morning, Mark.
Nice to see you.
Oh, it's nice to be back.
We've been on this journey together for almost 6 months now, exploring which direction the U.S. presidential campaign is going to go. We're less than 2 weeks away now from the first debate.
Yes, which could be pivotal.
Yeah, and I can't think of another time when the debate would be so important. I think there are a lot of people in the United States and around the world who are, it's kind of like a big sporting event. They can't imagine these two individuals on the same stage together, and they're looking forward to seeing it. It's going to be a spectacle. Or anything could happen that night, but what's happened in the last week with Hillary Clinton, is that a game changer?
Well, we raised this as part of our ongoing conversation that this election on Labor Day was statistically a dead heat. So as we enter the prime final, when people tune in, it looks like we have an even balance, and what could shift it and what could be a game changer. And when you and I have been talking about game changers for a long time, could be a terrorist incident. It could be a deliberate attempt to hack in by a foreign power, and we've seen that already. Apparently the Russians tried to affect the Democratic Convention. So there could be a deliberate effort by WikiLeaks, by others, to affect the election. And of course, one possible incident we've been talking about for a long time, well, could be a health incident.
Yeah.
And what was just a fever swamp conspiracy theory, which had a point. The Republicans were ginning up this health issue, but it was to say Donald Trump is strong and she is weak, because being strong is a key element of his appeal to the electorate. And if he could make her look weak, even though they were inventing stuff out of whole cloth, and they did a huge campaign on this. It went from the fringe right into the center, and now she has a health incident. So the question is this a game changer? Mark, you and I both check the odds every week. Have you checked today on what it is?
Yeah, 538.com, it's I think it's 69-31, the odds of Clinton winning. Yeah.
It's actually up a little bit from last week.
Well, it's just changed. It's now 67-33,
right,
roughly. So it's still 2/3, 1/3.
We're doing 70-30 approximately.
Yeah.
The answer to the question, is this a game changer, is it's too early to say. I think these odds we're looking at in front of us don't reflect yet two things. One is her health incident, and the other is her phrasing of the deplorables. Which is an interesting one. She's had a very bad week, and he is getting better. He's staying on script more. He's more disciplined. He's reading other people's speeches from the teleprompter, and she's giving him a lot to work with this deplorable. So between the health issue, the answer is we don't know. So far, it's the way it was. As we talked about, it's still hers to lose, but it's still possible that he can win. So in terms of the horse race aspect, so we've looked at state by state. It's tightening there. It's unbelievable in a way that a candidate who, like Trump, who has been systematically saying outrageous things, is actually seriously in contention and increasingly in contention.
Yeah, and is that because there's a different threshold? We're so used to him saying outrageous things. We're so used to him saying things that aren't true that it's not even news anymore when he does either.
Yes, there's a lot of speculation about why even bother trying to track down this stuff, and a lot of people have given up. But the people who like Trump and follow him, I probably are aware that he speaks in, let us say, hyperbole, and they kind of like it. It's kind of like watching the wrestling matches, the WWF. Everybody loves the theater of it.
Yeah.
And they get engaged, and a lot of people are doing that, obviously, on the Trump side. So this is still a very close horse race as of today, with the electoral edge, depending on this health issue, and we don't know, still going to Hillary Clinton. One question that's coming up, Mark, that's interesting to me as a political scientist, but it's really important, is this a realigning election?
Right.
They don't happen very often in American history, 4 or 5 times. I've got some political science criteria right here.
Yeah.
What does it take to have one of these very rare situations where the fundamentals of the party system change. And the first is that the electorate changes its voting pattern. It's a little more complicated than that. So that's really it. So we've talked, the red state, blue state, you raised it with me last week, and that seems pretty set. It doesn't look like it's set this year. Mm-hmm. The traditional blue states and traditional red states, some of them are in play now. If Donald Trump is to win, he's got to take what have been traditionally blue states, and there's a lot of red states which are in contention now. And this, as we talked about, it hasn't broken yet. We don't know. But that's possible that we're seeing in front of us a really fundamental change in the voting patterns. Secondly, maybe a conflict or an issue that divides the electorate. What's the issue here? Well, we've talked about this a lot, and we've had these guidelines, and one of them, my third, was that this is the day of the dispossessed. What we are seeing now, as we saw in Brexit, and as we see in the rise of populist parties all across Europe, is kind of a revolt of the masses, a revolt of those who say, yeah, you like globalization, you like free trade, you're the part of the 1%, and we're not. And we don't like what's happening, and we don't like the ethnic changes going on around. We wrap that in, and we just don't like losing our country. We wrap that in. So we have a situation where, indeed, we have the possibility of this being a realigning convention election because of that. We just, at the G20, we talked about what was the key takeaway from the G20, which our prime minister supported, is we realize that we have to change, that growth has to now be inclusive. And we just had Christine Lagarde in Canada, in Toronto, the head of the IMF, saying the same thing, almost word for word. The big powers are starting, the big economic powers are starting to shift to say, yeah, this may be an inflection point globally and in terms of politics, and it will affect the U.S. election. It's possible that the two parties are going to have new coalitions. Which,
when was the last time this happened?
Oh, gosh. They say of Ronald Reagan,
yeah,
but it goes all the way back to Lincoln.
Right.
So the Whig Party, which was a dominant party, totally has disappeared from American memory.
Yeah. So people forget that it wasn't always just the Republicans and the Democrats.
Indeed not. Yeah. And what about the rise of third parties? Well, let's talk about that in this election. The third parties are not going to be a factor, as near as we can tell. The Bernie people are going to go for the Greens. She's at 2%. And we just had the Libertarian. Now, that's hardly an alternative for a lot of people, the Libertarians. And the leader, Governor Johnson, was asked about Aleppo, and he said, what's Aleppo? I think he's likely to fade even further as a factor. We have a two-party race, but the parties may be possibly realigning. I'm not sure about this. We have a third element for what it takes, a political party that's so weak that it can be taken over and fragmented and control can be lost. So I think in addition to realigning parties, Mark, something that we ought to be talking about more that's been obscured by the everything we see in front of us, which is so spectacular. I mean, this is a circus. Hey, everybody loves a circus. Let's look at some of the things that hold the tent up. What about the disappearing political party? This is part of the realignment argument, but it looks as if the political parties, both of them, each of them, are increasingly irrelevant other than as, at the time of an election, somehow a place to park a vote. But the parties themselves, in more than one way, are starting to not be as strong, not be as organizing, not be the leading factor in American politics. And that's for more than one reason. One, we've seen this now for the last several cycles, the winner of the nomination takes over the party. Yeah. So you have groups that form, and the party doesn't control them. Then they take over the leadership. So it's an Obama political party now. Yeah. And right now, it's a Trump political party for the Republicans. So this is almost like a hostile takeover, since many Republicans are literally fleeing from their own nominee. And we've talked about this a lot. Why is he not even, why is he doing better now? It looks like more Republicans are finally starting to support their own nominee, and maybe that's why he's in contention. So the parties themselves have become less and less the centralizing factor, more open to takeover. Also, Within the parties, we've seen in the Republican Party in particular, factions form. So the parties are fragmenting. What's the Tea Party? It's not a party.
Right.
They're part of the
movement.
Republicans.
Yeah, it's a movement.
And then they have the Freedom Caucus within the party, which did in the Speaker of the House, the powerful Speaker of the House. Boehner was done in by the Freedom. So the party's fragmenting. So you have these takeovers, you have the fragmentation. But I think something we should really talk about a lot more, and I see almost nothing about it. There's alternatives to political parties in American politics right now, Mark. The Koch brothers, K-O-C-H, Koch is how it's spelled, Koch is how it's pronounced, have set up a parallel organization that is at least as potent, at least as powerful as the former Republican Party.
Yeah.
They have permanent staff on the ground. They're in every state. They have collected, I think, 700 wealthy donors. It's not just them. They make strategic decisions. They have caucuses. In this election, they've said, well, we aren't sure about Trump. We think he might not be the right way to go. It's going to take down the party. They are focusing, laser focused, on maintaining control of the Senate. And they're putting a lot of money in. Mind you, they lost a lot of money last time, lots of money betting against Obama. And apparently they got fresh money. One of the brothers is...
They haven't run out yet, that's for sure.
Well, one of the brothers is in the top 10 billionaires on Earth. So Bill Gates is still number one, apparently, again, and slim. So what we have here is the possibility that alternative organizations of all kinds are available from different from the parties. So the parties themselves are a weakening factor in American politics.
All right, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we'll touch on a few more points to do with the U.S. election. And then we'll also talk about nuclear testing and explosions in North Korea and the situation in Syria as well. Elliot Tepper is with us every Wednesday on Ottawa Today, Carleton University political scientist. Coming up, we are going to have more on the Red Blacks, and we're also going to talk to Alan Abel, who's been covering the U.S. election for Maclean's. We'll get his thoughts on the latest developments on the campaign trail as well, coming up at noon on Ottawa Today.
If it matters in Ottawa.
Elliot Tepper is with us every Wednesday on Ottawa Today, Carleton University political scientist. And just before we leave the American election campaign, where do you think all of this leaves us after this week of rather stunning and possibly game-changing events? Where are we?
In a dead heat.
Yeah.
With the possibility of a victory narrowly by either, or truly a landslide by either. That
so
is,
any outcome is still possible.
Any outcome is still possible. If there's a big game changer on either side, there's now an investigation of Trump by New York, because Trump University is under scrutiny. He says he's doing a health check. We'll see.
Yeah.
He won't release his taxes. There's many possibilities yet to come. But at the moment, the desire is still where it has been. There's a strong urge for change. And Donald Trump said, I will be your voice. And there's a strong concern for stability and safety and security with the status quo. It's fear versus hope, and it's a contest which is evenly balanced right now.
And in a race where symbolism is so important and images are so important, the debates will matter, I think, in a big way.
The debate, well, we had one here. You had a choice, sir.
Yeah.
And we had an era of a certain prime minister as a result of one sentence in a debate. This debate is indeed going to be crucial. Everybody's saying, and we've talked about this, Hillary Clinton is a veteran debater. I mean, she's had to take on Obama and Bernie. She's run twice successfully for the Senate. She's debated and debated. He's debated nobody one-on-one. But she's never faced anybody like Donald Trump.
Exactly.
There's an X factor with him, and we'll have to see how this plays out. If the debates are essentially a wash, that is, if they balance out, then it's still hers to win. But if he does well in the debate, it's his to lose.
Interesting. That's why we watch.
Yeah, that's why we have elections.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about a couple of other spots in the world. North Korea, we heard about the explosions there. Nuclear testing, obviously, going on. Syria's in the news as well. So give us your thoughts on both of those.
We have some big items in world affairs here. The first is the nuclear nightmare is back. We've gotten so comfortable, Mark, with the idea that this is not a worry. Nobody has to worry about ducking under their desks or being whole classes of school kids taken to the basements. It seems like an old and bad dream that the mist has cleared and we're in the sunshine. We're no longer in the sunshine, and we must take this seriously. The doomsday clock is at 3 minutes to midnight. They have not shifted it. This nuclear explosion possibly will mark a realization that the nuclear threat is real and that the power balance in East Asia is shifting rapidly. North Korea is developing a genuine nuclear capacity, and that capacity is under the control of, how do you even describe the young Kim?
Yeah.
But he's totally unpredictable, and he's totally rational in what he wants to do. This is not craziness. He knows exactly what he's doing. They now have a land capacity. They're developing intercontinental ballistic missiles. They are miniaturizing successfully. We don't know if this time was the case, but no doubt about it, the pace is picking up on the ability to launch an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead miniaturized, and they also have an undersea capacity. They have been launching their missiles from submarines. So land, sea, and air, there's the triad. No, they're not there yet, but don't be comforted by that. We need a much better nuclear control, and let's take it where it belongs. Everybody's finally saying what you and I have been talking about when this comes up every few months. Let's look at China. Finally, I think the spotlight is going where it has to be. There's only one country in the world that has any possibility of doing something, and China clearly has to change its internal calculation, or what we see is going to go on indefinitely. And their internal calculation is this. They have an overwhelming desire, they say, for regional stability, but they let this obvious source of instability fester on their own border. Primarily, they say, well, we're worried about being flooded, off the record. We're being flooded by refugees. We've seen what happened in Germany. We can't have the collapse of East Germany. This would be much, much worse. But actually, the geopolitics of it, they like having a buffer state between the American forces and the South Korean government allied to the U.S., and they won't give it up. And until they finally work out a deal with the U.S. in their own minds, this is an internal equation of pluses and minuses for China. How much instability are they willing to put up with where they carry the can? They're head of the six-party talks. There's no quite. And look what they're doing. They're pushing everybody around in the South China Sea. They're pushing Japan around. They're pushing America around. There's a possibility, and you've seen this today in the newspaper, of a World War III breaking out as a result of this totally unpredictable situation in North Korea and an expansive and aggressive, no longer satisfied with the status quo, China.
Very quickly on Syria, we're almost out of time, but...
some ray of hope in a dark world. The epicenter of our current global politics in many ways centers on we have to have peace in Syria. There's been no way. Kerry and Lavrov have been carrying on for a long time. An hour and a half, this wasn't noted enough, hour and a half conference between Putin and Obama at the G20. So out of all of that, we now have what looks like an effective enough peace. At least we're getting some humanitarian aid in there. But unless we work out something in Syria, the tragedies we've seen, which include destabilizing Europe, will continue.
It's interesting you mentioned the doomsday clock. As you mentioned, it's 3 minutes to midnight. It has been closer than that on one occasion, 2 minutes to midnight in 1953 during the Cold War.
Yes.
But it has been as far away as 17 minutes.
That's right.
And so, yeah, it's closer than almost ever before.
The people who know keep moving that clock forward.
Yeah. Thank you.
Certainly, Mark. Always.
Elliot Tepper, Carleton University Political